discuss the story that unfolded yesterday. Business Leadership South Africa has come out in support of ANC's new leadership, but has stressed the importance of initiating reforms. Joining me now in studio to discuss this and more is BLSA Communications Director, Themba Maseko. Mr. Maseko, for your time, I thank you. You're a man who's affair with the workings of government. You have worked within the presidency. What lies ahead for the new ANC president as he eyes the all-important 2019 national elections?
Yeah, it's a very important moment for him. He needs to put his stem firmly on the ground and make sure that he takes control of the leadership structures of the ANC. And as we know, the election process is still unfolding. They still have to elect the other members of the National Executive Committee, and the jury is still out about how that structure will be made up. But he still has to stamp his authority as president, because the branches, the delegates have given him the mandate to be a leader. They've given him a team. So we are all not sure whether he's completely happy with the team that he's been given, but nonetheless he has to work with what he's been given there. And with his experience and history, I think that Cyril can do it, can lead.
You mentioned the part that he will have to stamp his authority, and I agree with you. But my question is, how does someone with a margin win of 179 votes really stamp his authority? How does someone who really got half of his desired slate in the top 6 stamp his authority, when some say he has to work with Zuma allies like Ace Magashule, like David Mabuza, like Jesse Duarte?
In a political environment, leaders do understand that sometimes you choose your team, and in most cases you don't choose your team. And as a political leader, you've got to have the leadership skills, the qualities that will enable you to bring all of these people together, get them to understand that the country is almost nearing crisis point. The economy is faltering, there's unemployment, poverty, joblessness, and the mood generally in the country is not very positive. So he has to make sure that he stamps his authority by getting his top 6, top 5 members to understand that they now have a duty to unite their party, but most importantly to focus on rebuilding this economy, creating jobs, and making sure that we change the sentiment of business, of investors, but even of ordinary citizens, so that we can all feel good about being South Africans again.
Hey, sentiment is not a bad thing. I won't deny the impact of sentiment. Nothing really happened since yesterday, but the rand is trading better. The economy is actually, people feel like the economy would do better under Cyril Ramaphosa. But of course, that's just sentiment. It's not a tangible thing that really makes a long-lasting impact on people's lives. What does he need to do to make people feel that, you know, that they're part of a growing narrative and they're part of the future?
Well, our view is that as president of the country, he needs to begin to send very important signals. Firstly, to the business community, that he wants to work with them to grow the economy, because the people who grow the economy is not government. It's actually those companies, hundreds of companies, both listed companies and ordinary business people who are running shops around the corner, in malls around the country, to make sure that they actually believe in this country, in this economy, so that they can actually say that they're being led. So he needs to call everybody around the table. And as BLSA, we remain ready to sit with him around the table to put together what we term an economic recovery plan, to say these are the steps that need to be taken to make sure that we bring the economy back on track. But government has to come to the party to say what major policy reviews need to be put in place in the next 3 or 4 months or so,
and
so that we can actually start the ball rolling.
What policy reviews is BLSA looking for?
Well, one of the key examples is that firstly, he needs to make sure that there's policy certainty around the mining charter. Mining is an important component of our economy. There's a major dispute at this stage between the minister and the Chamber of Mines around the charter and lack of consultation, etc. So he needs to make a call, even though he's not president of the country, he needs to make a call as president of the party to say mining is an important sector in this industry. There needs to be certainty. You talk about telecoms, environment, there are many issues pertaining to digital migration. There are issues about the role of the state-owned enterprises, the SOEs, the fact that their governance structures are not in place, their boards are not properly operating properly, there's no proper governance, their balance sheets are actually unstable as we speak. There's major concerns about whether government is going to be implementing the nuclear deal that we cannot afford. So these are things that are actually creating stumbling blocks as we attempt to move forward as a country. So, and I think you can just make a call to say, as leader of the party, government, we think you need to do the following things, and they can be done.
That's an uncomfortable relationship there. I'm listening to how you're talking about it, and the power dynamics really at this stage.
Absolutely.
This is the day after Polokwane, almost, if you will. You know, you have an unpopular president with his citizenry, but who remains the boss of Cyril Ramaphosa in government. But yet Cyril is the boss of the party, which decides on government. You know where I'm going with this impasse. You know where I'm going with this impasse. Zuma may be gone, as he says, maybe going to join the Veterans League. But after 10-year presidency, he continues and he will continue to cast a long shadow, long after he's gone, on this country and how it's run. How does Cyril Ramaphosa solve that impasse? Does Zuma go?
If I was Cyril, I would actually make that call, decide whether the relationship can work or not. The most important thing is that the two of them need to sit around the table to say, how do we manage the transition between now and the next general elections? And there are key decisions that need to be made. The courts have already said, for example, that the president is not in a position to appoint the National Director of Public Prosecutions. There's the issue of a judicial inquiry on state capture, and the courts are beginning to say, you know, President, you are implicated or conflicted, rather, so you can't make these kinds of decisions. So Cyril needs to sit down with him and say, how do we manage this transition? They need to talk.
I'm going to ask you this as a young man in politics who saw the scars that still continue today from Polokwane. I thought about the situation yesterday as I was on the conference floor, and they were announcing the results. And I thought about it, it sounds like a logical thing to do, to recall President Zuma, because he may be a liability for the African National Congress going into the 2019 elections, but also a liability in government, right? But it would definitely make Polokwane not an anomaly, but a norm within the ANC, that when a new president gets elected, the old one gets recalled, wouldn't it? That would mean in 5 years or 10 years, Cyril will be recalled as president.
Well, that's one thing that I think the ruling party has to deal with, and that is essentially an issue about aligning the electoral period time frame with that of government, so that you don't have this period where there's uncertainty, especially when you have a series of unfortunate incidents that have implications for a serving president, a country president. And then you have a party leader who's just been elected and fresh. And I agree that sometimes it's not always, I never agreed with the recalling of President Mbeki at the time, because I thought it was setting a negative precedent, and I think that we may just see that situation playing itself out over the next few months. And I think we just have to wait and see. As the board of BLSA, it's not a matter that has been expressly discussed about what needs to happen after this election. So it's something that I'm sure my board would like to reflect on, but it's essentially in Cyril's court. He needs to decide.
Okay, I'm going to throw a spanner in the works here.
Yeah.
So I thought, he most likely has to recall someone. He has to recall President Jacob Zuma. As I said, a liability on both fronts. He has not been a popular president, maybe within the ANC constituency, but that is not someone that you want him to lead you into the 2019 elections, because opposition will continue to attack the ANC through President Jacob Zuma. What about putting in Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma as an interim leader?
As business organization, I think it will be difficult to end up delving too much into those kinds of issues. But I mean, the point still remains. If you take, for example, the issue of high fees for higher education, it's an announcement that was made by the president just on the eve of the conference, and all indications are that the Minister of Finance did not even know about
Treasury was not even
decision.
on the
Treasury was not on board. Universities were not given enough time to plan. So we are potentially facing a very, very difficult opening year for universities. And I think that a person like President Zuma did not help by making the announcement in the way that he did, without making sure that due process is followed. So I think that it will always raise challenges when you have a president sitting in Lutuli House and another individual sitting in the union buildings, so to speak. But it's an interesting challenge that he faces.
Well, that was Themba Maseko, Director of Communications at Business Leadership South Africa. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, we move on.